We are live.
We
We're
are
here.
live.
Yay.
Woo-hoo.
Welcome.
Yay.
I feel like it's been a moment.
It
It
has.
has. It's been a month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Been a moment, but also time is flying.
I know.
Time
Happy
is flying.
spring, everyone. I know.
Yes, happy spring. Thank you guys for always joining us. I guess every other week here. We have a really awesome session for today with Stephen Gates. Got to be honest, we don't know each other too well, but I have admired him for a long time. Honestly, he's got a really great personality and just like fun to listen to his podcast. So Stephen has worked for brands like InVision and Citi and has clients like Coca-Cola, Abercrombie, Metallica, which is pretty rad. And the in-house experience, agency experience, corporate experience, startup experience, podcasts for years. So we're really excited to have him here. So thanks, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
Right on.
Did you just like friend zone me? You described me as having a great personality. Like I feel like my mom always said I had a face for radio, but like I get it.
No, I do not.
Smooth. Love it. Welcome.
I was going to say that I love that we all gave devil horns to the Metallica reference. I think this is starting off splendidly.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we can't go any further without, applauding Jared for wearing the safety goggles, because I think for me, like if you're going to set the tone, that's the sort of tone you want to set going into a show.
Get ready.
Like this.
I was just feeling left out that I didn't have glasses. So
I'm glad you joined.
These are the ones I grabbed. So thanks for letting me join you guys.
Yeah, and if any stray splinters come flying out from like stage left, you're totally fine.
I'm set.
Yeah.
And in this space, it's possible.
The drumsticks, wayward drumsticks.
Yeah, that happens. Cool.
Yeah. So does anyone want to share where everyone's calling in from?
Oh yeah, we always love that. Ryan's already straight into it. He's dropped a comment.
Hi Ryan.
Hey Ryan, love to have you back. Yeah, it's always great when people can drop comments of in this feed where they are, interact with us. We always obviously jump to questions and things like that as well. And yeah, not every chance you get to connect with Stephen one-on-one like this, one-on-one, many-on-one, not sure. But anyway, that's what these sessions are for too. So yeah, where is everyone? I'm in New York, currently in New York, upstate. Not really though. I'm only an hour north of the city.
I know whenever I say I'm upstate, when I'm in Chester, people are like, "You're not in Buffalo."
It's not upstate.
Upstate.
But as somebody who is, so I live in Pittsburgh after I escaped New York City after 16 years, and I had plenty of friends who like anything above 50th was upstate, and then Westchester, and then Albany was upstate, and so I think upstate is a very relative concept.
Totally.
I feel a bit silly, but yeah.
I think if there's like bears that wander your property, I think you can say you're upstate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
right.
I think if you have like a decent size like yard, more than like 2x3.
Yeah. I think you're technically upstate then too, right, Erica? You're upper east, so that's above
I'm Upper East Side. Yep.
Oh,
yep.
Also from Pittsburgh. There you go.
Nice.
Yeah. So Savannah might actually look like a plant because she actually works for me. So
Awesome. Hi,
Nice.
Savannah.
If she starts dropping too many compliments, we'll be like, hold on.
Steve. She's here. That's what was it? Robin Williams always had a joke that like behind every guy was a woman rolling her eyes. So like, yeah.
Awesome. Chris Novak, welcome back. It's nice to have you here again from sunny Seattle. Wow, is Seattle ever sunny? That's awesome. I mean, you hear that Seattle just gets so much rain, and I visited University of Washington when I was looking at colleges because I really was interested in their crew program, and it was like the most beautiful weather, and everyone's like, "Don't get used to this."
We're going right in on the East Coast West Coast battle here.
It's begun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Tupac all over again.
I'm a spectator for this kind of stuff. I don't really know it. But it's cool to see this. Yeah, Chicago as well, Memphis, Tennessee.
Woohoo! Ooh,
Leslie's in SF.
nice.
Annie in LA. Nice.
Great.
Love it. Okay. So good all these people can jump in. Cincinnati.
Nice.
Positive thing you go, Chris.
Yeah.
If you aren't already connected with each other, highly recommend doing so.
Yeah.
That's what that's what the comment section is for some days.
Yeah.
Jump in there.
Yeah.
We also like to I don't know, get you guys chatting and giving us some thoughts, some sentiments. Maybe Stephen, you can contribute. And what is a question that we can ask this audience that we've got thus far that they can respond back? Previous ones have been like, how would you sum up your feelings of the industry in an emoji right now? Or how are you feeling about this, 1 to 10, or could be anything. So, but we'd love to hear from people, you know, get them thinking.
I would just, I mean, for me, it's like, look, what are people excited about?
What are you excited about?
What have you seen that's getting, like, what's something that's getting you fired up, or something that is motivated, or I think there's enough other talk about gloom and doom and everything else like that. Yeah. So I think that's, I'm always interested, like, what's getting people excited? What's getting them fired up? What are they seeing that's something they thought was cool?
Yeah.
Right. I think that.
Can you kick us off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Shit, on the spot. Sorry.
What am I seeing that's getting me excited right now? See, this is the problem when you've been in the industry this long. Like, oh, you know, you just always have the jaded answers at the ready.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, look, I think, and this is a bit of a plant. I think what's sort of getting me excited is, I think, with everything and all the insanity that's going on in the industry, I think what I'm excited to see is the number of people that I'm talking to that are taking the time to think about their mental health, that are taking the time to think about what they want, that are taking the time to, like, actually work on their brand and to get more of the career they want, as opposed to just like the one that gets given to them. And I think I've had a couple conversations lately with a couple people who are either doing their own thing or sort of doing something else, but I think kind of decided to take the leap and do something that looked a little bit different and shaped a little bit different. And I think those conversations, whenever you can just talk to somebody who's doing something that they love, you just can't help but be inspired.
I love that. That's really great. I always think of it sometimes in our space, like designing your career too. You've got to. You are designing. You're architecting it. You're crafting it. You're directing it. You are the construct. You know, the driver of it versus being the passenger and just kind of hanging on. And
I mean, I think it's the right reframe, right? Because I think for so many of us, we're great at working with clients, we're great at working with other brands, and then we turn the mirror on ourselves, and it just goes to like generic noise. And I think if you look at it like a design challenge, like, we've got the skills, you just have to focus them in a different way.
Yeah, design your life. Totally. What about for you two as well, Joanne, Erica? Who wants to go first? What's jazzing you up?
Well, I have two things. One is a personal thing and one is a more general thing. So the personal thing is that I have been talking about doing this George Michael show. I'm a singer as well. And I've always really loved George Michael, especially like Wham! It was like one of my first albums back when I was young. And so I finally booked the date. Woo-hoo!
Well done. Okay.
Yeah. So June 20th, which is a Friday at Pangea. In the East Village. So I'm really excited about it. And I have I just love putting on a show and just all the creative energy that comes from it. Like, who can I recruit to be on stage and audience participation and just creating this this feeling of connectedness. And we're all doing this thing together. Like, I just really love that about putting on live shows. Yeah. And then kind of in the same vein, the other thing I'm really excited about is our Duff Design Unfiltered, AKA Duff live event. For a little plug.
Free plug?
Nice. A little plug, just a little one, that we are doing in New York on Tuesday. So next week, the 25th at Fabric, which is in Tribeca area. From doors are at 5:30. We've got icebreakers at 6:30. We've got a fantastic panel that's going to be talking about the theme, which is WTF is craft.
Yes.
So I'm really looking forward to that because the last one in September was so fun. I just loved oh my God, I love this person. I love this person. Like, you're going to meet and like be best friends. And it was just, I just felt totally just like high on life after. It was so fun.
Buzzing. All right. I can dig it. Erica, let's get
What
you
am I?
jazzed right now.
I mean, I'm also excited about our event next week. I think it's going to be really
Yes.
great. I've been in charge of like who the tickets coming in, so I'm seeing all the people coming through, and I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be so great. Like, just matchmaking friendships, right? But then I don't know, I'm still pretty obsessed with AI, and most of my conversations are asking people like, what are they using? You know, tell me your use cases for ChatGPT or whatever. I love it. I was like talking to my aunt this weekend, and I told her just like I use it for recipes, and she was like, that's so great, that's so exciting. And so non-tech people and like not understanding it the same way that we do every day. It's I just love that stuff. So what about you, Jared?
I dig that. Yeah, I go through these phases of like I have to go and like refill my cup of getting a bit jazzed on design, on something, feeling inspired, because we're surrounded by design all day. That's part of our role, but many facets of this job for me, they're not specifically designed. Like it's organization, it's follow-up, it's, you know, dealing with lots of hits, sometimes hopefully having a win, but it feels like a lot of that. And I have to remind myself every now and then, like, hey, design is great. I really love design. Like I really love art, anything creative, and I want to refill that cup sometimes. So I swung into the little Morrison gallery down in Soho the other day, which is a photography kind of gallery. Nice. They sell prints, but it is a cool little space, second floor little walk up that you can go in and just look at prints. And it's just some incredible famous, you know, rock photographers for the most part. And just seeing some of those prints on the wall. I love that. It's super fun. It's really cool. So that got me a little bit jazzed to do that, like just to remind myself, like, hey, this is part of why we do what we do. Yeah, and then I will say I am excited about the event next week too, and that's part of like getting myself inspired and getting myself excited and wanting to bring like a real positive spin to whatever we put out there. And we're going to have this room full of designers, and how can those designers come away with positivity, with a feeling of that? Because I think, you know, I do spend a fair amount of time on LinkedIn. I feel like there's a bit more negativity there than positivity a lot of the time. So I'm like, all right, how can I turn this around a bit? So yeah, I got to be very intentional about trying to do that. So trying to refill the cup, get inspired, and then put my own positivity out there to try and pass it on to some other designers, hopefully.
And I feel like the topic could not be more perfect for you to be the host, like the MC of the night for the panel. Because I feel like when the three of us are talking and we're like, well, you know, networking strategies and this and that and the other, but you're like, yeah, but the portfolio has to be good. You're like, always your craft. It's like, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So
yes, I sit in on some very interesting folio reviews with design leaders. It's insane what some of them will pick out. You're like, wow. All right.
Wow. Do you agree with them mostly, or is it just kind of like,
I get it. I understand where they're coming from, but I just then really empathize with the designers out there, and I'm like, holy shit, you guys have such a task. Like that is really tough.
Yeah.
But when some of these companies, I think, have the reputations that they do for the work that they put out, I then can kind of see, okay, this is, you know, arguably the NFL of this, or it is the highest of the high league. They're wanting to find that type of designer, and therefore their level of scrutiny and pixel perfection expectation. You're like, okay, that's maybe why you have a reputation, why every other company quotes that company as being, you know, oh, we want a product like theirs.
Yeah.
That looks as good as theirs. And it's like, well, this is how they got there. But it's wild. It's tough. It's a tough bar at times, you know, seeing someone that, and, you know, these design leaders are positive people. I'm on a tangent now, and they're not doing it in a negative way, but just the expectation is just wild, you know, like, you know, this padding and spacing is different here. I don't know why they did this. That's slightly off. See that, you know, and you're like, oh, this is someone's like afterthought, a portfolio half the time, you know? So yeah, just goes to show sometimes you put in that effort, you'll get the result, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's going to make the win feel that much better.
I hope so.
It's going to keep going to that light at the end of the tunnel, Jared.
Yeah.
Painful.
It's all part of it. Yeah. It's all part of it.
Yeah. I'm looking who else is calling in, and we have Shane from India. So I always love to see like who are the most far-flung people that we have here.
Our location.
Yeah. I got Hugo.
Oh, UK, right?
Hi, Hugo.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, Brazil. Ricardo. Hey, Ricardo.
That's great.
Let's see. And then Lucia, also from Chicago. My sister just went to Chicago last weekend for her birthday. And I love how they color the river green for St. Patrick's Day. Like the whole thing was just like bright green. It was so cool.
Wow.
Oh, and she's a fan of yours, Stephen. She's heard your
There you go. Look out.
It's always a fun and inspiring experience. Awesome.
Another plant, or that one was legit? No, I'm just kidding.
Not all of them. Yeah, I think I've only got 2 plants here that I've recognized.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, very good.
Very cool. We got Reginald, who's excited about the new Jaguar design.
Interesting.
Wow, that's a very controversial thing.
I can't tell. You might have to tell if you're being sarcastic or legit. I don't know. Any thoughts on the Jaguar design, Stephen? Have you seen it?
Yeah. Oh no, of course I've seen it. Right, like everybody and their brother did a piece of content on it. Right. I don't know. There's anything new there. On the one hand, you can tell what the brief was. Right. You can tell like be disruptive, be those sort of things. Right. Like, so again, everybody knows what the brief was.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, I think they definitely lost a little too much of the heritage.
Yeah.
Right. Again, I think like you can see what they're going for more when you look at the cars and some of those sort of things. But again, there's a little bit of, for me, like, look, if it was meant to cause a provocation and a reaction, then it was wildly successful. Right. Did it get Jaguar back in the headlines? Sure. Right. But again, are you really targeting your core audience who's going to come to the dealership and buy a car? So, but look, for me, it's part of a bigger trend. Like we talk about AI, we talk about a lot of stuff right now, right? Like there's a lot of brands trying just a lot of stuff that isn't working.
Yeah.
Right. You see look, Sonos fired their CEO because they did an app launch that I'm going to bet probably used more AI than they probably wanted to. And then it didn't work. Right. You've seen like they put out, what was it? Mattel used AI to try to help them with the Wicked packaging, and it sent the QR code it to a porn site, not to the Wicked musical site.
Oh, snap.
Right? Like,
God.
So I think like we're seeing an over-index. Like, look, there's no doubt that there's a contraction in design right now, and an overuse of AI and an over like lean on what that is. But that's why I said I would have done the Jaguar work differently. Sure. But like I said, I think, for me though, it's always a little bit easy to vilify the result.
Yeah.
I think we've all done work and done things where it's like you rage against the client to do whatever it is and say, don't do that, or that's a really bad idea. And, whatever it is. And, you hit that point where it's sort of like, okay, look, do we want to complete the work or do those sort of things? So like I said, I haven't heard the whole behind the scenes story. So
right. Yeah,
I understand the reaction, but I also don't want to be too quick to judge on what that process looked like.
Yeah, I think there's something in that around, like, I went to South by Southwest a few years ago, and I watched this great talk of a guy talking about Comic Sans as a font, and how, like, what designer likes Comic Sans, really? But his talk, funnily enough, was like, it nailed the brief, like the specific brief for what that font was to be was exactly that. And, he was showing signage of like, put your dishes in the sink, like classic, we'd see in an office or something like that. And they always use Comic Sans, pick up after your dog, that kind of stuff. But yeah, he's like, now the brief, you can dislike the font all you like, but it nailed exactly what the brief was.
But that's the problem, right? I think that's the problem with portfolios and everything else is that, look, we work in a medium that doesn't have a right answer.
Yeah.
Right. Like 2 + 2 isn't 4. 2 + 2 is like burnt sienna, right? Like it's not. You can debate that stuff till the cows come home, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I think that's always the interesting part of that discussion is like, okay, look, just because it doesn't work for you.
But
like I said, I get it.
That's a tough one. Yep.
I want to switch gears a little bit and pick up on something that we talked about with you, Stephen, in our little powwow a couple days ago, kind of thinking of ideas for today. And we talked about people playing a small game, right? Like there's a lot of fear out there. Like, how, I think people are trying to play it safe. Their resume, their summary sounds very generic. They want to try to match the job description as perfectly as they can. And I really loved your philosophy around like standing out, like being yourself, like being your authentic self. Could you expand a little bit on that and maybe explain your stance on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I'm a veteran of being laid off 3 times. So I think I have a unfortunate amount of experience in doing the job hunt and doing a lot of other things. So look, I think that whenever you're in that moment, when you're looking for a new job, when you're doing anything else, right? Like there's a bit of a panic response. There's a little bit of like, look, I can't miss out on any opportunity. I have to appeal to everybody. I have to, right, like have as broad a reach as possible because, I mean, look, I got bills to pay. I don't want to sit around. I don't want to do a lot of those sort of things, right? So, and I think, that's then coupled against like the modern job search. I don't know if there aren't many things that I think are more inhumane than going through like the job search right now, right? Like all you are looking for is some measure of hope, some measure of control, and some level of validation that what I've done in my career has value, right? And so I think that there's a trap that a lot of people fall into because while you have that instinct of like, look, I need to get on my feet, I need to get a job, what that results in is, I think, a lot of people who tend to just become like overly generic.
Yep.
Right. Of it's I think Jared and I, we talked about this the other day, right? Like I had an old school ad professor who would walk up to an ad that you did and put his thumb over the logo and say, could you tell me who that's for? Right. And I see portfolios and resumes every single week where I do that same thing. And it's always like the 2 sentences of like corporate buzzword bullshit of like, looking for aspirational. History doesn't remember well-behaved people and companies don't want to hire generic talent. Right. Full stop. And so for me, the thing to do is like whenever you are looking, and especially with what's going on right now, you need to double down on being different, right? Like you need to, and I believe this for a really long time. It's because I had a very difficult journey to arriving at that realization. I think like my show is called The Crazy One. I have Here's the Crazy Ones tattooed on my right arm, not as like an Apple fanboy, because for me, like the realization of my career, when the moment that I stopped showing up as who I thought everybody wanted me to be, and I started showing up as who I was. The moment whenever I realized that what made me different was my superpower, not my weakness, that was the moment my career took off, right? And I talked to a lot of people, and it's like, well, look, I'm really early on in my career, and I'm too old in my career. Like, it's the Goldilocks problem, right? I don't have enough experience. I have too much experience. I have, but again, I think that's the thing to me that always really works, is that ability to say, look, this is who I am. This is what I have to offer. The resumes there's no about section in the resume. There's no about section in their site. They just, I think that's the thing you got to remember, right? Like I'm not hiring where you've been, I'm hiring where you're going. And that ability to just say, and it's interesting, like in preparing for the show, I talked to a friend of mine who leads design evangelism at Apple. And he just was like, Steve, I can't even tell you. He's like, I am so bored of like the formulaic resumes and the formulaic portfolios. He's like, I swear to God, he's like, I get more excited when people tell me about their side projects. Because like at least it's interesting and different. Right. Like, and so again, I think that's the part of it for me, is that you almost have to untrain your brain to say, and look, I've been a big believer. I do this with my clients. I do it myself. I know it sounds like clickbaity, but look, like build a brand somebody hates. And because I think like what you want to do, like that's brand strategy 101.
You can't appeal to everyone.
If you build a brand that is strong enough and clear enough that when people say, look, that's for me, that's what I want, or they say, look, not for me. In either case, there's an emotion, there's clarity, there's a reaction, you're getting noticed. Right. Because again, I think a lot of us also fall into that trap of forgetting you're not like somebody didn't show up to work today just to look at your resume. Right. There's a stack of 10 or 20 or 50 other ones. And that this is like a competition, right? This is a piece of advertising. And so again, I think what we were saying before, right, about like how do you apply the design process? If you think about it in those terms, you would never write your resume and your book the way that you do.
Right.
It's like really putting yourself in the user's shoes, the user being the hiring manager, the recruiter, the person who's the gatekeeper looking at your resume. What is it that they need?
Right.
They need to know, they need something that's going to stand out and make them different, right? Like something that's going to make you memorable. Like I was coaching this fantastic designer who used to be in TV. And I didn't know that because he didn't have it on his resume. But in looking through his portfolio, there was like a little hidden section that was kind of like my other life or, you know, my past life. And it was so intriguing. And granted, he doesn't do it anymore, but he came out of this world where he was like juggling flamethrowers and like working on these like really cool like reality TV, you know, shows. Where it's like, oh, that's so interesting. And like, there's probably some connection of like what he learned in that world. Like, how do you bring that to the design world? So making that connection. But even if not, even just by itself, its own merits, it's just really interesting and it's really memorable. And I'm going to think to myself like, oh, the flamethrower guy, he'd be great.
Yeah.
You know, he'd be great for that job. You know,
but my thing is like, look, I think having a good sense of who you are helps you in the job you're in the next job you want, if you want to go do your own thing, any of those sort of things, right? Because I think, look, for me, there's a subtle thing, but I mentor people every single week. And one of the biggest things that I see is that there is such a profound difference between having the career you want and having the career the industry will give you.
Right.
Because I think for so many people, like, it's like, okay, what's next on the career ladder? What's next on, and look, I think Chris Novak made a good point in the comments too. Like, I'm not immune or unaware that, you know, a lot of my advice will not get you past a lot of the AI bots and screening and stuff like that.
Yep.
My approach has also always been that, I mean, and especially right now, like applying for a job on LinkedIn, you might as well just go play the lottery. I think like every job has 2,000 applications in 10 minutes. Again, I talk to companies all the time whenever they ask me what's wrong with their creativity or their innovation pipeline, and I tell them it's the way they hire. I've had CEOs who have talked to me like, oh my God, you'd have been perfect for this job. And I said, I know, I applied for it and you turned me down instantly. What are you talking about? I'm like, you don't even understand what talent there is, right? And again, I think that's a lot of the, I understand, and look, I've been there many times where like you want to apply to that job, you feel like that's a good way to be able to do it and to be able to do those sort of things. But it's just with the ghost jobs and with, you know, I know so many recruiters and HR people are so overwhelmed that there is that tendency to say, okay, look, how do I streamline it to get it past? Because what, 95% of companies now are using resume filters. I tend to always, I guess, decided to play that game a little bit differently, and rather just engaging in a broken system, try to find some different ways of outreach or like asking somebody who works there for an introduction or to look at my book, like to do something else, just knowing what I'm going to be up against and how broken that is.
Yeah. I love that. And what are those other things that you would do? So if people feel like they're stuck in this hamster wheel, like feeling productive, but they're actually just making busy work for themselves or not being productive, feels productive.
No. And look, and I think that
what can I do?
There's, I mean, look, if I knew the answer, we'd all write a book and retire. Right. But I think, look, a lot of it for me is, I think trying to network, trying to actually, I think, and I am really bad at this. You don't know how much support you have until you ask for it. Of actually going out and saying, look, I'm looking for this job. I think try to be specific, because a lot of people come to me and go, Steve, I'm looking for a job. And it's like, hey, good luck. And they're like, look, I'd really love to be a UX designer at a North American car company. There's like 3 people I can instantly introduce you to. Right. And I think, you know, for me, that there's a lot of that, you know, trying to do outreach. There's, you know, I helped co-found a site called the Amazing Design People List. Like, you name the company, there are probably people or leaders that are on there that work for that company. You know, go to them, say, look, what do you think about my book? What do I need to do to get a job there? Like, do you know of anybody who's doing this sort of thing? Right. I just think you're going to have to be a little non-conventional in how you want to do some of those things and to be able to work with that, because I think, and I've fallen into this trap, and that's why I go back to, like, I think hope is such an important thing, because I think a lot of it for me is like, I'm just like, how do you build a hope economy? How do I have something to look forward to? How do I, in a time where things can feel hopeless or out of control or whatever that is,
Yep.
And again, I think there's a lot of different ways of being able to do it. But I think if you do it genuinely, I think if you do it in a way that stands out, I think I still see it with my content where authenticity still cuts through. I think that there is a challenge right now where so many people are making so much noise, right? Like, honestly, I'm not on LinkedIn a ton anymore because it's just like so many people with nothing to say.
Yep.
But, and look, and I decided to be the guinea pig the last time I got off and publicly shared a spectacular face plant and going out and looking for a job that didn't work and pivoting to like do my own thing out of desperation. And, you know, it got a huge amount of attention and was a bit of a canary in the coal mine. But I think that's some part of it is also just that ability to just sort of keep pivoting and trying different things. And like I said, I don't know that a lot of people, because, and again, I think this is why we don't talk about it enough, right? And like I remember even like Debbie Millman interviewed me for Design Matters, and I said I got laid off, and after the show, she's like, "Why would you say that?" And it's like, because it's true, and too many people bullshit, right? Like I talk to people that have full-blown panic attacks just about the thought of putting that green open to work ring on their LinkedIn. Right? That it is seen as a scarlet letter and a mark of failure, and all of those are extremely valid ways to feel about it. Right. And it can feel like you're screaming into the void. But I think to me, that's that moment. And again, I think that's what I'm the big proponent of is like embracing your crazy, embracing what makes you different. Because I think the other thing in that moment is kind of like, what do you have to lose?
Right.
Yeah, it's a good point. Do you think there can be more? I think you talk about this a lot too, Erica, like just normalization of the last few years in terms of tenures, people having gaps, people being laid off. Like it's so commonplace. How is that maybe factoring into a possible hiring decision from a company today? Like, and looking at someone's background and go, oh, I had 3 months off. What happened? Like what happened? Whatever the fuck they wanted to happen. Like maybe they read books for 3 months. I don't know. I just sometimes these expectations of these linear career sort of growth and path and trajectories, I think there could be more work on normalization. And I will say I've seen 2 or 3 design leaders just in the last week, VPs of design at pretty notable companies. And if I look at what they were doing before they took that role, it was not working at another company. They were maybe consulting, they were maybe running their own thing. There's maybe a sabbatical kind of in there if I'm just, stalking on LinkedIn. I love that. That's good. That's great. I think we do
need to normalize it, right? I think we need to, because I think for a lot of, I think there's an expectation there's a right way to have a career. There isn't.
Right.
Like nobody would tell you my career path was a good idea. Right. And I think there's a little bit of like, we also need to understand, right? Like success is a concept that exists in hindsight, right? If I would have flamed out and I'd have been doing, whatever, had a landscaping business or something totally different because design didn't work, everybody would have said I knew it. Right. But I think once it works, then everybody's like, oh, see, we knew all along. Right? But I think this is a lot of it for me is that everybody wants to project this great image, this perfect image, this like, there's a right way to do it. Or I need this, like nothing causes more imposter syndrome than job descriptions. But it is. And I think that's a lot of it for me is like why we need to have a lot more of these conversations because I think so many people are in fear of what will people think or will they understand? And I think especially like COVID then into this economy back to back has been a mess. But again, I think we need to get rid of that shame. We need to sort of understand what that is. I think we need to, again, relook at how do we find talent, or it's like, he's really great, but you have a 3-month gap in his resume. It's like, and I think that's to me, I think what maybe is the most concerning trend right now. And I think I felt it 3 years ago and even now is we do seem to be in a bit of an odd era where there seems to be what I'll describe as like experienceism. Where it was the first time in my career where I ever felt like having a lot of experience was a liability. Right. Where it's sort of like, wow, like, because, it's Goldilocks as it is. Your teams are too big. Your teams are too small, whatever it is. But I do think that there is a little bit of that, like, devaluating devaluing of design, a little bit of a contraction away from that. I think there's going to be a correction on what that is, right? But and also, look, I also think we need to remember that if companies knew what they needed, they wouldn't want to hire us.
Yeah.
I mean, I made fun of a job description a year or so ago because they're like, we need like 10 years of experience in Figma. And it's like, okay, unless I've got a fucking time machine, right? Like that's not possible.
Well, I mean, that is a requirement. You also need to be a time traveler. That was probably probably on the job description.
Unicorn role keeps getting bigger.
Seller's market, you know.
Right.
I mean, I'll say personally from my own experience, when I see a resume where I see somebody took a year off to travel, or they took a year off to like be a dad or be a mom, or like do something that's, you know, that's out of the industry completely, or they just decided, I don't know, I would think it'd be really interesting if somebody was just like, I wanted to work at Trader Joe's for like 6 months and like bag groceries just to like have the experience, like American Citi, you know, where it's like he goes back and he works at the fast food place. You know, but it's like when I see a resume like that, personally, I'm just like, first of all, I love the authenticity. I love the fact that they're being themselves. They're bringing that forward. And second of all, it's like they're living a full life.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is really like you're bringing the skills and the experience and your perspective and all these different areas to your job. And I think if you're living in this like very narrow focus, like you're only thinking design and Figma all the time, how boring is that? And I think you're just going to put out shoddier work than somebody who's coming with a broader life perspective. Personally, that's how I feel about it.
And look, and sometimes I think it's a red flag too, because I think in a lot of cases, because to me, look, I look at an interview as when a company's on their best behavior. Right. And if that's as good as it's going to get, and you want to look at a commoditization of my skills, this is probably not going to turn into a strategic role once I get there.
Right.
Right. And I think, but also to me, it's like, look, I've had people have just said, look, I took 3 months off because I needed to get rid of the toxic bullshit from my last job so I could go into the next one with a clear head. It's like, hey, man, we're like more people, I think, need to do that. Right. But and it is, I think there's that tug of war between, like, is it remote? Is it in the office? Do we are we valuing individuality and things like that? Or are a lot of companies still valuing compliance, right? Like there's a lot of that push and pull. And I think that's where we need to remember that you're interviewing that company as much as they're interviewing you.
Yeah.
And way too many young designers I talk to, and I'm like, for me, the telltale is always, I said, did you negotiate your salary? And they said, well, no, I was just grateful for the job. And it was like, no. Like I understand, like when you're in that moment, and like I've been there, right? Like the first interview is like oxygen to a drowning man. And like, this is great, and this is so amazing, and this is so fantastic. And then like I always try to write a list down of what I need, and then I go back and realize this job is going to give me like one of the 4 things I need. And I'm over-indexing on the attention and the possibility, not the reality, right? That's why most creative change jobs every 2 to 3 years, because we get possibility drunk, right? You've been someplace 2 or 3 years, you built up some baggage, you see what the reality is. It isn't all the open possibility of a new job, which will have just as much baggage, give it 2 or 3 years.
You've talked a bit about, you know, sort of crafting your own way, you know, being the driver of your own career. Like, what were some things for you that maybe you did to help arrive at that, or to think about, well, where do I want to be driving? What is my version of being in control of this new Jaguar you just got?
I mean, it's tough, right? And I think, like, on the one hand, what I did is not going to work for everybody, right? Like, that's
right.
Yesterday's winning lottery numbers. But look, I think a lot of what I did was, I think, one was I tried to actually spend time to say, what do I want? Right. What makes me happy? It tends to be, I ask these 2 interview questions. It always tends to throw people of like, one, can you tell me how you have an idea? Just because I'm looking for, I think being part of being a successful creative is a certain level of self-awareness. How do I have an idea? What do I do? Can I summon my creativity on demand? And the other part is, what do you need to be happy? Because I think we can lose sight of that. We can rationalize it. I certainly did. I think, you know, that was a big, I put my show on hiatus for a year and a lot of other things like that, because I realized, look, I went through a 5 to 6 year stretch in my career. I didn't produce any work I was proud of. Right. I had become a strategist and a politician and an interventionist, and not any of the things that I love, and my mental health reflected that. Right. look, I think a lot of the challenges whenever you want to build your brand and say, this is who I am, that there's always a tug of war between, is this really who I am, or is this who I aspirationally think I am? Right. That's why, and a lot of times whenever you try to build that brand, it's so hard to do because it's just like, is this bullshit?
Yeah.
Right. So one of the starting points I usually have a lot of people do is like, go out to your friends, your family, your significant others, ex-coworkers, whatever it is, current coworkers, and just ask them to describe what they think makes you great or different or unique in 3 separate words. Right. I'm not looking for War and Peace. I'm not looking for a description. But I think once you do that, then again, you can start doing the mind map, throw it in a mural, a whiteboard, whatever it is. You're going to see them start to group together. Because in a lot of cases, what I think is there may be some things you don't give yourself enough credit for. Sure. There may be some things you give yourself too much credit for. But I think it's the recognition for, I had to come to the realization that I'm always going to be my own biggest blind spot. Right? How I see myself is not how the world sees me. It's the same point where if I go back and watch this show afterwards, I've heard my voice in my head every single day for my entire life, and I cannot sound like that much of a tool, but I will.
It's
right?
possible.
There's a cognitive difference between how I think I sound and how I actually sound, right? Like, why did I say right 47 times? Right? But I think it's starting that foundation, right? And then for a lot of it for me was also just engaging in the process of building that brand and building that narrative differently.
Okay.
I'm a designer by profession and a writer by necessity. And so every time I sit down to write a description or write something about my brand or do whatever that is, I will sit down and spend a lot of time and use a lot of words that say absolutely nothing. Right? It's the same problem that I go to everybody about. If I cover the name, it could apply to freaking anybody. And look, and I think what I did to try to change that is what I'll do is sit down with whatever, a Google Doc, Evernote, like Obsidian, whatever, and I turn on dictation and I start talking. Because I think it brings in a differentiated voice. It tends to bring in more detail. Like if I said, okay, look, I'm going to introduce myself, because that's the thing I always do that when I mentor people, is I get them to tell me about themselves, and then I look at what's on their resume, and those two never match. They're never even close.
Good point.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're always like, one is such a sanitized, stripped down, generic version of that. And it's like, okay, like, you know, the narrative, it's just you're passing it through a filter before it gets there, right? And look, and I think a lot of it for me is then the reminder of living. That's why I have tattoos on both forearms around these sort of like, because I need those reminders. But I think it's taking the risk, right? Because I have also been reminded more times than not, right, that like discomfort is the cost of fulfillment.
Okay. And
I think for me, it's very much positioning myself and reminding myself that what I want is probably on the other side of what I don't want to deal with. Right? Whether it's being vulnerable, because it's a risk, right? Like it's easier to be generic. It's easier, full stop. Right? Standing out, having an opinion, having a voice, saying this is what I believe. You plant a flag and you take a position. It's tough to do it in a job. It's really tough to do it in corporate America, right? When there tends to just be like, oh, I'll float around and go with what everybody says. Way easier. Not always the best outcome. But again, I think, but a lot of those sort of things have just noticed the difference between, and I think that's a lot of times what I'll do, right? Is the simple exercise for me is tell me who you are, then do it again and don't lie, right? Like tell me you always leave out. Right. Like, tell me how you dropped out of college. Tell me about your brief flirtation with Satanism. Tell me about what you think you're really good at. Tell me what you think you're not really good at. Right. Like we tend to sort of sanitize everything and take the things that we think are weird or strange or ugly or a little bit different and we push them off to the side. But I think every great creative I've ever seen leans into that 100%. Right. Like think about your favorite artist, your favorite painter, your favorite singer. They didn't get where they are by being like everybody else.
Right.
Right.
But that's how you find your tribe too, right? It's like if you're able to bring that vulnerability and your authenticity, the people that recognize that and like that, like those are your people.
Right. 100%.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing is part of it is also being, it is about standing out, but I think it is about building that brand and sort of saying, look, is this going to be a good fit? Am I going to be successful? And look, there's a decent amount of personal and financial privilege in being able to make that statement that not everybody's going to be able to lean into. But I do think no matter where you are, the ability to start to build that up, to do it in your next review, to do it, because I just, again, I understand the pressure where that is. Like, look, I'm going through an inflection point right now where, I mean, we've been on a hell of a run for 3 years, and I'm finding myself coming up on a moment where we've had to let some clients go. The economy's having an effect. We're going to have to reinvent ourselves. Like, there's a huge amount of anxiety that's going along with, like, what's that reinvention going to look like?
Yeah.
But those are in those moments, and in those moments of panic attacks or when I'm laying there in the dark or whatever it is, of reminding myself that, like, being generic and like everybody else is not going to get me where I want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Word.
Yep.
Word. And when you talk about a personal brand, how does that actually show up in the world? We've been talking about resumes, summaries, portfolios, like what's your story, but what other things could that be?
I mean, look, for me, one of the things I've tried very hard to do is to not make my brand be an act, right? Because there's a lot of people I know that who you see on screen or who you see on stage or whatever it is sort of a affectation.
Yeah.
Right. And look, I think a lot of what it is like, if, you know, creativity matters to you, if that's your brand, right? Making sure that you're putting yourselves in positions to be creative, to make sure that you're valuing your thinking above your execution, to present your work that way, right? If it's being honesty, because I think in a lot of ways, like even the way I build my book and my resume and things like that is like, okay, look, you know, I tend to be about, you know, really believing in people, brutal honesty at times. Again, really leaning into creativity and what does that mean and how do you create space for it? And then I try to build a book and examples and everything else that, again, kind of lines up to that and is the proof. But I think, like, look, for me, if you're building a brand that isn't who you are every day, your authentic self, maybe it's who you are at home, maybe it is who are your friends, maybe you don't feel like you can be that way at work, right? But that's the part of it for me, right? In the same way brands build like an edifice or a veneer, as soon as you try the product, you see that it's fake.
Yep.
And again, I think that for me, that's where, like, you know, it's not about a logo. It's not about, because one, that's a road to insanity of like, what typeface sums me up as a person?
Comic Sans?
Yeah, I was going to say, lately it's felt like Comic Sans. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, we all have those days where it's like,
we all have Comic Sans.
Am I Papyrus today or am I Comic Sans? But look, but I think it is having that clarity of saying, this is what I believe in, this is what I want to do, this is what matters, this is what I need to be successful. Right? When I was in InVision, I was a co-author on one of the biggest reports ever done on like creativity and business. And that's the thing that you saw was, you know, we developed a maturity scale of 1 to 5 for an organization. 1 was just like make it pretty, 5 was that strategic asset everybody wanted to copy. And most everybody got stuck at a 3. And what you saw was the bridge between 3 and 4 was whenever a team or a person or a leader would define what they needed to be successful, right? They would no longer just take whatever dumpster fire somebody handed them whenever design was the place where the company's BS went to go get settled, and they would define what they need to be successful, right? And I think when it comes to personal branding, for me, it's very similar of what do you need to be successful? What do you need to be happy? What do those criteria look like? How do I define that whenever I am given that, this is what I give in return that is an exponential impact for your business or whatever that is, right? But I think a lot of us struggle because creativity and corporate culture just do not like to coexist.
Tough one.
Right. So what you're really saying, it's less about like an affect or a deliverable or a thing you're putting out there. It's really living whatever it is that's your authenticity. And
it's a brand, right?
It's going to come out. Right.
And I think this is where, for me, too many people, like even huge corporations, get this wrong. A brand and a visual language are not the same thing.
No.
Right. A brand is an emotion. A brand is a feeling. Right. A brand is, okay, when I interact with this, what is that emotional aftertaste I get whenever I walk away from the brand? Right. A visual language is then a visual expression of that.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, if you're able to get that center right, that emotional piece right, then yes, that should inform how your portfolio looks. It should inform your tone of voice. It should inform your resume. But again, it needs to work that way, just the same way in strategy and brand. If it comes the other way, of like, oh, there's a cool font, let me create a positioning, that never works. Right? Because I think that's what it is that what is the emotion people are left with after they interact with you?
Yeah.
Are they focused? Are they inspired? Are they right? What is that again? And again, I describe it as like an emotional aftertaste. Like, what is that when they interact with you? What is that thing that you do to people? Is it an activation? Is it a focusing? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think
like
that
Simon Sinek, like discover your why. Like, what is the core, right?
Yeah.
It bleeds into everything that you do. Similar to taste, a really tasteful person, you just see taste in everything that they do.
Right.
A great designer, sometimes, not all, but many times they have amazing interior design taste. They have great graphic design taste. They have, whatever it might be, their fashion sense is, because it's just part of who they are, part of what they do. And I think that some of that brand, it can just bleed into everything that you do. It's not just one single thing, but it is the way you write. It is the kind of work that you create and put out. It's the way that you assemble that work in your own personal folio, which is all your choices, not your company choices that you've worked for. That is like that brand, and it's in everything. It's not just one thing. And that's the way it's the easiest way to be authentic is, having it bleed into everything like that.
Right. But again, I think as easy as that is to say,
right,
I think we also need to recognize, and I'm a big believer, and I think being your authentic self and being unique is one of the hardest and most rebellious acts there is.
Yeah.
Right. That it is an easy thing to say and an incredibly hard thing to do.
I think Felix is saying that in the comments right there as well. When you've been job hunting for so long, it starts to feel like you have to be someone you're not just to get a foot in the door. Yeah. I hear you.
And look, and that's why I said, I think that's why I want to acknowledge, or put an asterisk on what that is, because, I will say that, there are a lot of companies right now that, like I said, there's a devaluation of design that it's seen as being much more commoditized. It's being seen as like, oh, AI can do it, or they're investing in other places or doing what that is. We've seen this cycle before. I think this one's a little bit different. Because normally, like, you see the economic impact and design and marketing are affected. I think on this one, we've got the double whammy of sort of the economic impact coupled with AI. And you're already seeing a lot of companies that are like, oh, we'll just let the AI do it. We're seeing that's not working out great for a lot of them, but it is. And I think, Felix's point is right. And I think you get to that point where believing in yourself, or that act of like self-belief, is just an act of will, because you feel like there's so much evidence to the contrary. Right. That I've applied for months. I've applied to hundreds of roles. I've done whatever it is. I'm not getting calls back. I'm not like, something is wrong. And it's not just I'm not getting calls back. If we're being honest, the reaction is something is wrong with me. Right. I have made bad choices. I am not upskilled enough. I am not talented. Right. That self-talk turns into something else.
Sure.
Right. And I think that is what leads to that. Just like, for the love of God, like, could somebody just love me? Can somebody tell me I have value? Like, not even as a joke, right? But like, just seriously, like, can I just do? And that's why I said, like, I know that I'm about to step into that, because I'm gonna have to go back out and find new clients and do all that. That I know that emotion's going to be coming for me. Like, do I still have it? Are we still doing good work? Is this what they want? Are we too small? Are we too big? Did the industry change? That's all the self-talk, right? But to me, I think but it is that bias towards action and clarity and authenticity that I think, but it is in that moment. And I think that's why, if you need a support system or things like that, you need to also look at how do you build that so that those moments, you don't give into those.
You've obviously had more time to develop it, and you've gotten to a place though too where you feel very confident and comfortable being your authentic self. You've got a brand, you've built a brand that people hate in some ways, your words. So you've done that, but that then attracts the clients ultimately for you that you want to work for, and you want to work with, right? And it's almost a self-selection process to an extent. And you're not trying to cater to every client out there and to say, hey, we're getting light on work. I guess we need to get more work. I need to be something for everyone so I can win this. It's like, no, I have to be true to myself and work with the clients that matter.
And there's an important distinction on what you just said that I do want to make, though. Because, like, look, whenever I would look for a job, I was like, you can work wherever you want, or you could, like, whatever you think it is. There's some part of me that spent the last couple of years trying to destroy my brand. Right. Because I realize that there's a very toxic construct that, like, people make it. Right. Like, you get to a place where you don't have to worry about this stuff. Yes, I have a brand. Again, I still battle with what that is. I still battle with the insecurity of what that is.
Yep.
I mean, I will say that I do feel like I have tried to build a career where I think how you show up matters, how you treat people matters, the work you put in, the work that you do, knowing that you deliver matters, right? That is not always a popular way of doing things. I think I try to be a humanistic leader that cares more about people than the HR playbook. And it has. And look, and that's the thing, is the last 3 years, I've gotten 100% of our work on referral, right? We haven't had to pitch any business. We haven't had to, like, it's people who used to work with me or know of my reputation or know what that is, or so we've gotten work that way, right? That's a lot of work, right? Like it's and honestly, I haven't talked about it because I know a lot of people aren't in that position, right? And so you feel guilty, I think, honestly, being there. But look, I think I'm a believer that if you want to see change, you live the change you want to see. You don't criticize like the other things that are out there, right? So I think that for me, that's why I've tried to share my job hunt or my journey or my vulnerabilities or like whatever that is, because I just think that's the only way we're going to normalize it. Is to be able to do some of that, is to talk about this stuff. But I mean, look, and I think that's, I find it hopeful, but also sad, because I think a lot of people, whenever they talk to me or they meet me, they say, look, you talk about creativity about the way I wish it was.
Okay.
Right. Like, I haven't seen an example of somebody who can do this and be successful. Right. And and it's tough. But I think that's where, for me, I think topics like this, demystifying it, what you three are doing is so important. Being able to say, look, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I think that's my thing, is like, I've conditioned myself of like, if I'm where everybody else isn't, that's probably where I want to be. Right. If I'm saying, I make content for me, that's why I don't charge for it. That's why I don't take sponsors. It's just like, and I think a lot of it for me has more than anything been a very hard road to teach myself to not look externally for validation, but to say, look, if I think this is smart, if I think this is right, if I trust my gut, even in my job search, right? The number of years I'll do research, I'll go on Glassdoor, I'll look at all this, every data point leads to this should be the next thing for me. And there's something in my gut that's just like, don't do it. like something's wrong. And 100% of the time, the company collapsed, the role got eliminated. Like something was just, it's like all that mental exercise, and your gut's just like, don't do it. But it's also why my career path is a mess, because I followed my gut where it's like, there's something interesting there. That kind of scares me. That feels interesting. Let's go do that.
Have you guys heard of that book, the Rick Rubin book, The Creative Act?
Yeah, I think that's it right there.
Oh, cool. I'm listening to it on audiobook right now,
including a spiral-bound one over there that I can mark up.
Oh, great. Great. I haven't finished it. I'm listening to it on audiobook, but one of the passages I'm listening to right now, which I really love, is talking about how if you're putting out work that you think is going to please the masses, but it's not pleasing you, it's going to be a failure in some way. People are going to smell the bullshit. They're going to smell that this isn't like your passion. It's not really coming from you. But when you put stuff out there that you're like, this is really different than my past work that's maybe been successful, that people know me for, but I'm really feeling this excitement around it and I want to do it. It's not even necessarily the thing itself that people are like liking or not liking, but they like the energy behind it.
Right?
Like passion.
Look, but I think that's a lot of it. And look, I think Joel made a really good point in the chat. Like, for me, and look, I've said this for years, right? Like, design is a blue collar profession, right? This is why I've had a war on light bulbs, right? Like, I think it is the dumbest fucking construct to describe what we do, because it's this idea that like, oh, you sit around and there's this magical moment where you get this idea and everything makes sense and you have all the answers. That is maybe that's the way for everybody else. That's the furthest thing from the way I've ever created anything. Right. But I think it is recognizing that, again, this is why I study a lot of sports psychology, because I think what we're talking about, it's emotional, right? It's, if you study sports psychology and they'll say like, look, I'm in the zone and a baseball looks like a beach ball, right? Or if I'm really struggling, it looks like a BB. I think creativity is the same way. And again, and I think that's why many of us, I think, fundamentally reject that job search or struggle with it so much, is just because it is all the things that we hate, in the loss of control, the loss of focus, the emotionality and a lot of that sort of stuff. But
Good point. I love it. We're pretty much at time. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any last wrap-ups. This has been amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm hearing you taking notes, Erica.
Yep.
I know. I feel like we could talk for hours. This is such a great discussion. Stephen, thank you so much for being with us and just sharing all of your, and I love your vulnerability and the fact that you're coming with so many answers, and yet I also feel like you're like, I don't have the answers, but you have beautiful answers and just beautiful ways of thinking about things that I think are really valuable.
Being creative is your ability to be the most confident, uncertain person.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Right. And that's what I mean. I think as an industry, we'd all be better. Again, if we were more honest and open and did those sort of things and just kind of talked about, it's like every time I do a leadership camp, day one, everybody's fantastic and happy and great. And by day two, it's like, can we all just cut the bullshit? And they're like, yeah, I'm so frustrated. I just wish they'd package me out. I'm like, okay, can we just
Yeah.
I love that. Let's get real. Yeah.
Love it.
Could do with that.
Love it.
Awesome.
Nice.
Thank you everyone for tuning in, for all the questions, all the comments as well. Love that too.
Yeah.
Again, connect with each other, seeing people, commenting to each other as well. I love to see that.
Yeah.
This is great. I feel like we're gonna have to have you back for an episode.
Yeah.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
I love it. Okay, cool.
Nice.
Great.
Cannot thank you enough, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yeah. All right. Until next time.
All right.
I'm hitting the button. Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.